me being one of the few black people in white spaces has been the norm of my life for over half of my life. So it's kind of just become a natural thing to be like, okay, this is just what, white people do. They say things that they don't fully understand the implications of what they say. They do things, and then, to be able to deal with that in that micro level, it makes the blatant and vulgar kind of racism like, yeah, well, that goes without saying. Like, and that's much rarer. So to deal with something that's like consistent, like every day, you get used to that, and then you just figure out how to navigate it since it's there. It's the water that we live in. So it's not like a fish gets used to a certain climate, or it dies. So if that's the water, if that's the environment that you live in, either you're going to adapt to it or you're going to die. And we're very good at adapting as black people in this country. As a social worker, I see this happen even with the way we diagnose in psychological settings, in psychiatric settings. More often than not, and this is just really anecdotal because I don't have research data, but when little white guys have behavioral problems, there's a much quicker assessment to say there's trauma going on here, what happened to this child, that they're acting this way. Little black boys have the same behavior, there's a much quicker assessment to say, well, he's probably conduct disorder or on track to be some sort of sociopath, instead of what happened to this child, why is he behaving this way? So for white people, in my profession even, the question is when somebody's having problems, well, what happened to that person? When black people are having problems, well, that's just the way they are. We even see this in healthcare, that doctors assume that pain thresholds are higher for black people for whatever reason, so they're less likely to get the pain medication. And that's actually been researched. So there's something about just the way we're acculturated and conditioned in this to be more empathic to the experience of any white person, and then to be less empathic and more judgmental of that person as a person for people of color. Like they did this, or there's something wrong with them, as opposed to something happened to them and they need to be helped. Even opioids right now. White people are using heroin, they're dying, we need treatment. We have to do this right away. 1980s, black people are using crack cocaine, burning through communities, we need to lock these folks up. There's a drastic response that we have in this country to the suffering of people of color versus white people. And without acknowledging that, because I'm sure some people are going to read this and be like, no, or hear this and be like, I can't accept that. We'll never get to a place where policies are equitable, where our culture is, or not our culture, but our society is fair. And the reason I use equitable, because instead of equal, which is a different term, equal means everybody gets the same thing. Equitable means everybody gets what they need. And what we see is, too often, a particular group will think that everybody should just get the same thing and ignore the deficits that exist. But just, libertarian policy tends to suggest, just wipe everything out and everybody starts from scratch. And then that's kind of the assumption that if everybody just gives their chance, it's all fair. When the reality is it's not a even playing field right now. So we can't have policies that say it's an even playing field when it's not. That requires equity or equitable policies first. And then once the playing field's even, then you pull back and say, now everybody have at it, every man for himself, everybody's created equally. But that's not the case right now, because we live in a country where one particular population was considered property at one time and others weren't.